The arm was the only part of him above ground. Mara Coyle saw it from the sled trail, 5 fingers gone gray-white and curled toward the sky. A man's hand reaching up out of 3 feet of Montana snow, as though the mountain itself had tried to keep him and failed. She had been hauling firewood since before light. She dropped the rope. The wind had buried the rest of him, sometime in the night, and the only reason she found him at all was that he had clawed that one hand free before the cold took the strength to do more. She did not scream. She had stopped screaming at things a long time ago. She knelt, and she started digging with her bare hands, and she counted his breaths. There were not many. If you have ever pulled something living out of a place that should have killed it, you already know the feeling that came next. And if you want to stay for the rest of it, subscribe to this channel and stay with me to the end. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Because what Mara Coyle pulled out of that snow was not what she thought it was, and the truth of it would not show itself for another 40 days. Now let us go back to that white slope in the high country, where a widow with frozen hands is digging a stranger free and does not yet know what she has found. She got him onto the sled by a method that had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with refusing to stop. She was not a small woman. She had never been a small woman, and she had spent her 34 years being looked at for it. But the body the town of Hardin Creek had measured and found excessive was the same body that dragged a grown man 200 yards uphill through snow that came to her knees. She did it in stages. 10 yards. Rest. 10 more. The mountain did not help her, and it did not stop her, which was the most the mountain ever did for anyone. Her husband Tom had been dead 11 months. He had bought the high cabin 3 winters back, the one nobody else wanted, because it sat too far up the pass, and the snow closed the road from November to April. Tom had liked being closed off from the world. Tom had liked a great many things that left her. When he died of the fever in a single hard week, alone on a mountain with a milk cow, 40 laying hens, and a stack of his debts she was still paying down $1 at a time. The town had assumed she would come down and sell. She had not come down. She had stayed, because the cabin was the one thing in her life that had never once told her she was too much for it. She had gone to Hardin Creek exactly twice since the burial. Both times she had walked the length of the main street with her chin level and her eyes forward, while the mercantile porch went quiet and then loud behind her. The second time she had heard the storekeeper's wife say, not even lowering her voice, that it was a wonder the widow's cabin floor held her at all. Mara had bought her flour and her coffee and her lamp oil. She had counted out her coins on the counter. She had not stopped walking, then or after, and she had not gone back down since. The mountain asked nothing of her. The mountain was enough. So when she got the stranger inside and laid him on the floor by the stove, she was a woman well practiced in doing difficult things alone and expecting no one to thank her for it. She cut his frozen coat away with Tom's hunting knife. She had thought, from the gray of his hand, that she was undressing a dead man who simply had not finished dying yet. She was wrong. Under the ice-stiff wool there was a slow heart still going, stubborn as a clock wound too tight, in a body that had clearly once been powerful and was now starved down to rope and bone. There was a wound high on his shoulder, old and badly healed, the kind of thing a man does himself in the dark with no one to do it better. There was frostbite at 3 fingertips that she would spend the next week fighting to save, and would, in the end, lose 2 of. And there was, knotted on a leather cord around his neck and frozen to the skin, a tin star. She did not understand it at first. She warmed it loose with her thumb and turned it to the lamp. A lawman's badge, worn down so the letters were near gone, but she could read enough. A Deputy United States Marshal's star. She set it on the table and looked at the unconscious man on her floor for a long moment, and then she went back to saving his life, because the question of who he was could wait, and the question of whether he would see morning could not. He woke on the third day. He came up out of the fever the way a drowning man comes up out of water, all at once, with his good hand already swinging. She caught his wrist before he could strike her. She did not flinch, and she did not let go. "You're in my house," she said, "on my mountain. You were dead, and now you're not, and that's on account of me, so you'll lie back down before you tear open work I spent 2 nights stitching." He stared at her. His eyes were the pale gray of weak coffee, and they had the wariness in them of a man who had learned the hard way that being awake was usually worse than being asleep. "Where?" he managed. His voice was wreckage. "Hardin Creek Pass. Coyle cabin, the high one." She let go of his wrist. He did not swing again. "Your name?" He was quiet so long she thought the fever had taken his hearing. Then, Silas. Silas what? Just Silas. She had taken in his face by then, the scar, the years, the way he held himself even half dead like a man braced for a blow from any direction. "All right," she said. "Just Silas. I'm Mara. There's broth. You'll drink it slow, or you'll bring it back up and waste my elk, and I did not winter that elk to feed it to my floor." She did not ask him about the star. She had decided, somewhere in the second night of keeping him alive, that a man was entitled to wake all the way up before the world started asking him things. She set the cup in his good hand and steadied it with her own when it shook. And she watched him drink, and she said nothing at all. She fed him for a week before he could sit a full hour. The food was the medicine, and they both knew it. She made him a marrow broth first, then a soft bread soaked in the fat of the broth, then the day he could hold a spoon himself, a thick stew of elk, and the last of her root cellar carrots, and an onion she had been saving without knowing what for. The smell of it filled the one-room cabin like a living thing. She watched him bring the first spoonful to his mouth and stop. Just stop. With his eyes closed, the spoon trembling. A man who had clearly gone a long way past hunger into some place that does not have a name. He did not say anything. He did not have to. She had cooked for a man who needed it before. She knew that face. She turned away and gave him the privacy of not being watched while he came back to himself, one mouthful at a time. "You cook," he said when the bowl was empty. It was not quite a question. "I do most things," she said. Cooking's the one folks seemed to mind the least. She was, in the days that followed, a great deal more than a cook, though she announced none of it. She rebandaged the fingers she could not save and took them at the knuckle with the knife held in the stove flame first, and she did it so steadily he barely cried out. She noticed his cough was wet and wrong, and she packed his chest with a mustard plaster her own mother had sworn by. And the wet went out of it in 2 days. She noticed the way he favored his right side and found, when she pressed, an old rib that had set crooked, and there was nothing to be done about that one, but she told him plainly what it was, so he would stop fearing it was something worse. She did not wait to be asked, and she did not wait to be thanked. She simply did what she saw needed doing, the way she always had, for people who had mostly taken it as their due. Silas did not take it as his due. That was the first thing about him that was different. On the 8th day she came in from the cow with her arms full, and found he had dragged himself up and split a small armful of kindling one-handed at the stove, and stacked it by the hearth, and was gray-faced and shaking with the cost of it. "You'll undo everything," she said, furious in the particular way of a person frightened. He looked at the kindling and not at her. "You've been carrying it all," he said. Wasn't right. He did not say more than that. He did not need to. She understood, standing there with her arms full of feed, that no one had done a single thing for this woman in 11 months that she had not had to do for herself first, and that this near-dead stranger splitting kindling he could barely lift was the closest thing to being cared for she had felt since they put Tom in the ground. She set the feed down and said nothing, and they let the kindling sit between them and speak for both of them. There was a night near the middle of his mending when the fever tried to come back. It came on after dark the way the bad things always do, and she sat up with him through all of it. She put cool cloths on his forehead and wrung them out and put them back. And when he started talking out of his head, names she did not know, a place that was burning, a child he kept telling to run, she did not wake him, and she did not shush him. She held his good hand, and she let him say all of it to the dark, because she had learned that some things have to be said out loud to someone before a body will let them go, and it did not matter whether the someone understood. By the gray hour before dawn, the fever broke. He surfaced and found her still there, still holding on, her eyes raw with the long watch, and he looked at her the way a man looks at the first solid ground after a long time at sea. Neither of them said anything about the night after, but he never again called himself just Silas to her, as though she had earned, somewhere in those black hours, the right to the whole of him. She found the rest of it on the 20th day. She had been mending his coat, the one she'd cut off him, which she'd kept, because good wool was good wool, and the dead don't need it, but the living might. In the lining sewn flat, where a man hides what he cannot afford to lose, she found a folded paper gone soft with sweat and time. She should not have read it. She read it. It was a notice printed and creased to the point of falling apart, and it offered $400 for the capture or killing of a man, and the name on it was not Silas. The name on it was a name she knew. Everyone in 3 territories knew it. The notice called him a murderer. She sat with the paper a long while. The man it described had killed 3 men in a railroad town 2 years past. The man on her floor had split her kindling one-handed because it wasn't right that she carry it all. She had learned a long time ago that the world's account of a person and the person himself were often 2 strangers who had never met. But she had also learned that a woman alone on a mountain who guesses wrong about a dangerous man does not generally live to correct the error. She put the paper on the table next to the tin star, and she waited for him to wake. When he saw them both laid out there, side by side, something went out of his face. Not fear exactly, but the particular stillness of a man who has been waiting a long time for the floor to finally give way. "You can ask me," he said. "I'm asking." He told her then in the short flat sentences of a man who did not waste words and did not expect to be believed. He had been a deputy marshal. The star was true. The 3 men he had killed were true. What the notice left off was that those 3 men had burned a homestead with a family inside it over a water claim, and that the law in that town was bought and the judge was bought, and the only justice those people were ever going to get was the justice Silas brought them with the gun he was no longer fit to carry afterward. The men who burned the family had friends. Those friends had money. The money had printed the notice and put his real name on it, and his star had become a thing he wore against his skin where no one could see it, because it was the only proof left in the world that he had once been something other than the word on that paper. He had been running for 2 years. He had walked up the pass in the storm because he had stopped particularly minding whether he came down the other side. "That's the truth of it," he said. "You can do what you want with it. Town pay you $400. That's more than this place is worth." Mara looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the notice, and she opened the stove, and she put it in the fire, and she watched it go. "My husband owed near that much when he died," she said. I've been paying it off in eggs and butter and not sleeping. $400 would have changed my whole life." She closed the stove. "I find I'd rather keep the man than the money. You'll need that hand looked at proper come spring. Until then, you'll earn your keep, since you seem to feel strongly about it, and you'll stop walking up mountains in storms hoping they'll finish what you won't." He did not answer. He went, instead, and got the milk pail from its hook and went out to the cow, which was the only thing he was strong enough to do and was therefore everything. The man came down the pass in the first week of the thaw. Mara saw the rider from the yard and knew before he was close what he was, a bounty man, lean and easy in the saddle, with the patient look of someone who had tracked a thing a long way and was in no hurry now that he had it cornered. He had a paper of his own. He had heard, down in Hardin Creek, that the widow Coyle had taken in a half-frozen stranger over the winter. And he had a description. And descriptions were his trade. He did not get down off his horse. He sat there in her yard with the spring mud sucking at the hooves, and he told her, friendly as you please, that the man inside her cabin was worth $400 to the right people, and that she could have a portion of it for her trouble, or she could have a great deal of trouble instead. Her choice, no rush. He'd take either. Silas had come to the door. He had a winter's worth of Mara's cooking back on his frame by then, and the look of a man again, instead of a corpse. But his shooting hand was short 2 fingers, and they all 3 knew it. The bounty man knew it best of all. He smiled at Silas, the way a man smiles at money he has already spent. What the bounty man did not know was the thing the town did not know either. The thing Mara had ridden down the mountain 4 days before to set in motion the moment the road cleared. The thing she had told no one, not even Silas, because she had learned not to promise what she could not yet prove. She had not spent the winter only nursing a stranger. She had spent it reading every word of the soft creased notice before she burned it, and writing letters in her steady hand, and she had a cousin married to a clerk in the territorial marshal's office in Helena. And she had laid out in plain ink everything Silas had told her about a bought judge and a burned family, and 3 men no one had ever answered for. She had not known if anyone would listen to a fat widow writing from a closed-off mountain about a wanted man she was harboring. She had written it anyway. That was the thing about Mara Coyle. She did not wait to be rescued when there was anything left she could still try herself. The answer had come down on the same thaw that brought the bounty man. It was riding into the yard now behind him. 2 men with real stars and a writ from a territorial judge who had taken an interest, very late and very quietly, in the matter of a deputy marshal run out of his own jurisdiction by the friends of arsonists. It happened in the open, in the spring mud, with the cow watching and the hens loose and scratching, and Mara standing on her own porch with her chin level. The senior marshal did not ask Silas to prove anything. He had read the letters. He looked at the bounty man and told him the paper he carried had been pulled, that the warrant was void as of the Territorial Review, and that the $400 he had ridden up the mountain for did not exist and never would, and that he could ride back down and tell his employers the law had remembered how to read. Then he turned to Silas, and in front of the bounty man and the 2 riders and the widow and God, he gave him back his name. Not Silas. His whole name, the one off the notice, said plainly and without shame, with the word deputy in front of it where it belonged. The bounty man rode down the pass with nothing. Some men in this world are defeated, and some are merely sent home, and he was the second kind, which is its own quiet justice. The marshal stayed for a meal. Mara fed them, of course, because she fed everyone. And they ate like men who had forgotten food could be made on purpose. And then they rode down too, and the mountain was quiet again, and the road was open, and for the first time in 2 years the man on the porch was not wanted by anyone except the woman standing next to him. You wrote letters, Silas said. It was not quite a question. I do most things, Mara said. Writing's the one folks seem to mind the most. They were married in Hardin Creek in the second week of June by the same congregation that had measured her and found her too much. She walked the length of the main street with her chin level and her eyes forward, and the porch went quiet. And then, because the senior marshal had said certain things in town before he left, and because a story travels faster than any apology, the porch did something it had never done for her before. It said nothing unkind at all. Some of them changed. Some were simply quiet. She did not require them to grovel. She only required them to move out of her way, which they did. Because a woman who pulls a marshal out of a snowbank with her bare hands and clears his name with her own ink is not a woman a town stays comfortable mocking for long. The high cabin filled out over the years that followed. Silas's hand healed crooked, but it healed, and he learned to do most things left-handed, and the two of them ran the place together up where the road closed every November, which suited them both, having each spent enough of their lives being looked at by people at the bottom of mountains. The debt got paid. The fences got mended. The barn door, which had hung at a tired angle since Tom's time, got set right one afternoon without anyone asking him to, and Mara watched him do it from the kitchen window, and did not say a word, and neither did he. In the spring of 1904, their daughter married under the cottonwood in the lower meadow, the same tree where Mara had once buried a husband and a stack of debts, and the woman she used to be who believed the world's account of her. The girl had her mother's steadiness and her father's stillness, and a name nobody in 3 territories had ever printed on a notice. There was bread rising in the cabin and smoke from the chimney and morning light coming in clean through the window over the basin Mara had scrubbed out the first hour she ever stood in that house. Mara Coyle had been told her whole life that she was too much, too big, too plain, too proud, too much woman for the space the world wished to give her. She had dug a dying man out of the snow with the very hands that proved them wrong, and she had given him back his name, and he had given her back the only thing she had never been able to claim for herself, a place that did not merely tolerate the room she took up, but was built, board by board and winter by winter, entirely around it. She did not need their permission to belong. She had stopped asking for it the day she found a gray hand reaching up out of the snow and decided, without a moment's hesitation, that whatever it was attached to was worth saving. She took up every inch of the life she had earned, with both hands, her whole self, and she stayed.